So hello, everyone. Welcome to the YSI at UNFCCC COP28 in this webinar series. This is the first webinar that we are doing, and the goal, our intention of today is to build the conversation as a path towards COP28. This series of webinars are done thanks to the Young Scholars Initiative, Farmo Francesco, the Università di Padova, and European Carbon Farmers. And we are very happy to have you all joining us here. And I do want to say that my name is Maria Virginia, and I'm from Argentina. And we invite you to write in the chat from where you are calling from. And also, like, if you can share with us if you know what COP is, or if this is the first time you are hearing about the process of COP. So today we want to share the agenda of the first webinar with all of you. Now we are doing the first moment of the welcoming and introduction while we receive more participants to join our webinar. Then we will have the first presentation on what is the COP process, why the process of COP28 is relevant, and hear about the experience and the way that we as young people can get engaged in this process. Then we will have the presentation from Gonzalo Muñoz, who will share his experience and involvement with the process of COP as entrepreneur, with his relation of the process with economics, and the involvement of different stakeholders in COP28, and the different experience he has been doing since he joined the process, and this year in particular. As the presentations are going, we will be receiving questions. Feel free to write comments in the chat, ask any questions you may have, because then we will have a moment specific for Q&A, where we are going to be able to ask questions or share our impressions of what we are hearing, and come to the screen. As this is a webinar, you will have the opportunity to come to the screen to ask the questions, to share your comments. And last, we will conclude all together, and we will share with you about the next webinar. As I mentioned, this is a series of 3 meetings that we are planning to have. And this first meeting that is happening today, right now, it has the main intention of being the path toward COP28. So, like, to be able to share with all of you why we as young people, why we coming from different backgrounds, coming from different histories, professions, and things, why this process is relevant for us to get involved, and why it's so important for us to take action in these processes. And you will hear from people that has very active experience and lives COP daily in their jobs. So you will not hear about this ideal thing of what COP28 is, but what is that translating into actions. Our second webinar will be on December 9th at 1 p.m. All of this is set time. And this will happen from the grounds of COP. So many YSI members and members from different groups and organizations, we will be sharing from our experience, what we are seeing, what we are feeling as we are on the grounds of COP. And the third webinar will be on December 20, and it will be, as you can imagine, the after COP, so sharing what happened in COP, what main things were discussed, what main things were the conclusions, in order to build the path and also to get engaged in this process. So we did want to introduce our speaker. We were going to have with us Maria Azul, that was going to share her experience on the COP and how is she getting involved and how she started getting involved as a young member, but sadly she told us today that she is not able to join us. But we still wanted to have her present here, and we wanted to share with all of you that that she is a young person from Argentina, very committed with climate change. Azul we met her during the process of COP26, where Mateusz and actually Gonzalo, they were working together as part of the high-level champion team. Azul joined us as a youth fellow, and we have together with us also Mateusz that joined as a youth fellow during that process of COP26. And we always try to invite new faces, so it's a pity that she could not join us today, but we will hear the same experience and the, like, I guess the same commitment from Mateusz that will be sharing with us now at the beginning of this presentation. So I think that now, having that said, I will pass the word to Mateusz, so you can share with us from your experience and with all of us that we are here, like, what is the COP? If you can share what is in paper, but also what is in real life, and how you got involved in COP, like, and why you got involved in the COP.
Thank you, Maria Virginia, and hi everyone. Welcome to what we hope is a home for you, and you will feel comfortable here. You will learn and enjoy those webinars, and this one in particular. You don't have Maria Azul, you have me. So Azul is very sorry for not being able to be with us, but that's the way it is. I will try sharing two parts of content, let's say, in those 5-7 minutes before we invite Gonzalo to the stage. And firstly, I would like to share the technical things, let's say, even though or despite them being technical, I'm sure there will be interesting. So what is COP? What is the history? Why is the process relevant? And what about youth involvement in all of that? Very importantly, which is our pathway and segment into the personal experience with the COP and what is also coming up with COP28. So COP stands for, it's good to start with definitions. Maria, when she opened the webinar, she used the word or the acronym UNFCCC, which stands for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and COP stands for Conference of the Parties. So COP, Conference of the Parties, is a meeting that is a very long meeting. It takes around 2 weeks every year of the parties. And by parties, we understand member states, so governments or countries that are members of the United Nations, meeting in a formal process to agree on something, to negotiate something, and to continue in their own member states and together on the path of what has been agreed. And of course, the topic of those discussions and deliberations and agreements is climate change. The process dates back to the Rio meeting in 1992, which was the foundation, or which is the foundation for this process continuing every year, with some notable successes, which I'm sure you are aware of, like the Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement has been negotiated in one of the COPs, this one happening in Paris, in which parties, the member states, or sorry, not the member states, that the European Union language, the parties to the convention, the nations agreed, hey, we need to, and we have the ambition of getting to net zero by 2050. We do that because we want to stop climate change, and we want to both mitigate and adapt to those changes, because we recognize, and this is what has been agreed before, and recognized before connected with scientific information, we, the humans, are responsible for speeding up climate change. We are leading to the reality that is threatening our livelihoods, that is threatening especially the poor, which is also the important dimension to remember, and indigenous peoples. So therefore, let's do something about it. That we could be going a little bit deeper, because this process, the COP process, is having a big meeting preparing for the COP roughly around June each year, in which like a small COP happens, preparing for the big negotiations, which are always hosted by certain presidency. So in the case of COP26, the presidency was the UK. Last year we met and the presidency was Egypt. Now the presidency is United Arab Emirates, and therefore we will be meeting in Dubai. And presidency before UK was Chile, which is what Gonzalo is, which is the presidency that nominated Gonzalo to be high-level champion for climate action. Why is that? Why is this process relevant? For many reasons. The major one, from my perspective at least, is that we have a global agreement on the state of reality, and we can take action because of that. That is hopefully coordinated among parties. Very important body within UNFCCC is IPCC, International Panel of Experts on Climate Change, that is doing this big report that you can Google, and many of you probably heard of it already, that is giving input to the process. And then, for example, the Climate Fresk is using that input to educate about climate change. So this is why it's relevant. Over the years, and this is where Azul, Gonzalo, me, and others like Tomasz Hruszczov, colleague of Gonzalo, or Nigel Topping, high-level champion for climate action with COP26, come in. The process, the formal negotiations have been expanded to include voices that, at the beginning at least, were not that present in the conversation. And all of those are called non-state actors. Non-state actors are those who are not parties to the agreement. They are not signing the final document. Those non-state actors are mobilized by high-level champions for climate action to once again be involved in the process, be encouraged to take action on their own, like, for example, companies or even universities or cities or regions signing up today net zero commitments and following through with that. At the same time, encouraging, not to use the word putting pressure on negotiations and negotiators, to reach more ambitious agreements and deliver net zero faster in a just way. Moving into youth involvement, a lot is there. Last presidency was historic because it created the position of youth envoy that now the current presidency UAE continues with. And earlier, high-level champions team, that's me, Azul, also Lia, Farai, and Beatriz from Brazil, instituted youth fellowship that I, together with Azul, we've been one of those 5. So voices of youth are included. And of course, there's a long way to go with, for example, bringing more youth in or making COP more accessible. But those efforts are happening, and you can certainly get involved. As an example, the current presidency is offering subsidized accommodation to all those who have blue badges, i.e. can access the negotiating space at very affordable prices, which is always a challenge. And it seems like we are preparing for a really inclusive COP, which is amazing, and it shows how much we have achieved in this time. So to finish off with a personal experience, I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing, meaning trying to build a bridge between climate change, climate policy and agriculture policy, if not my involvement in the COP, with the COP in 2026, with COP26 in 2021. We, as Farm of Francesco, one of the co-organizers of this webinar, we would not be doing the work that we are doing, for example, by supporting a farmer from Uganda to join COP27 if not our personal involvement in that process earlier. And now it's amazing we will be able to physically be at the COP28 in Dubai, thanks to a cooperation between YSI, who is offering financial support for us to be there, for Maria Virginia that opened up this webinar, and me to be there physically, and the Polish government that is allowing us to access the space with party overflow badges. And actually yesterday, to finish off the personal experience, as a consequence, fairly indirect, but very much a consequence of the work done with COP26, I and 4 other young people going to the COP with Polish party overflow badges, we've been able to meet with the President of Poland to share our hopes and expectations for the COP and ask Mr. President to include certain things in his remarks. And I can, of course, assure you that youth was front and central in our invitations to the President to include in his speech. Just transition being another one, and I'm sure Gonzalo will touch upon that. So that is what Azul was going to share with us, the history of the COP and then personal experience. Of course, the personal experience is mine, is not hers, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to share it. And with that, we'll move to our keynote speaker, Gonzalo Muñoz, who has a very long bio that you can find on the YSI website. I will only say a few key remarks about Gonzalo and his work in chronological order. Before getting involved with COP25 as high-level champion for climate action, Gonzalo was and remains very active in the business world, trying to do business for good through companies that he founded, but also through supporting the B Corp movement that I'm sure many of you have heard of and are very well aware of that. COP25, I guess, and we are looking forward to hearing more about that, was a breakthrough moment for Gonzalo because he was nominated by the Presidency of Chile to be high-level champion for COP25, which was supposed to last, I guess, over a little bit over a year, but then we had COVID in between, so COP26 got pushed away for a year, and Gonzalo stayed in that role for longer than what I guess he initially planned. Back then, or in that role, together with then Nigel Topping from the UK, COP26 high-level champion, they created a huge opening for non-state actors to be very present in the COP process, and me and Azul and other youth fellows are one of many examples of that. Gonzalo and Nigel launched Race to Zero, Race to Resilience, and then Glasgow Net Zero Financial Alliance as campaigns of high-level champions to mobilize non-state actors to both go for adaptation and mitigation when it comes to climate change. And Gonzalo still remains very active part of the UNFCCC process, especially on the non-state actor side, supporting the current presidency, United Arab Emirates, with food systems work. And as he liked to say, he's committed to bringing that all the way till COP30, whatever that means, and we will hear what that means from him. So that is Gonzalo. We are very, very happy to have you here, Gonzalo. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your leadership, your humor, your for everything. The microphone is yours.
Thanks so much, my dear friend. Thanks, of course, to YSI for setting the room today for this conversation, and thanks to everyone that is attending this event for their interest on the topic. I think that Mateusz already mentioned perfectly the generalities of COP. I would like to try to position our focus on things that are being evolving and changing, and I would say very rapidly. Of course, in reaction to a world that is confronting a polycrisis, where I would say every single aspect of our life is changing quite dramatically and quite rapidly. Some of those, I would say, are major difficulties that we're confronting. We're referring to the climate crisis, but it's hard to just climate as a topic without speaking about water shortage. It's difficult to consider just climate without considering also migrations. Also political aspects of this agenda in terms of the threat to the democracy and how much in some places of the world the main concept of climate and sometimes the main concept of taking care of the environment is getting politicized and generating some I would say cracks in our society. Of course, as you can imagine, and I'm being a farmer myself as well as Mateusz, I am totally related to how much the food production and the food system is being threatened by the climate crisis. We know that at this point, the climate crisis is affecting almost every single crop around the world due to the changes of temperature. I'm a farmer, as I said, so I know which are the ranges of temperature that will require my crop to grow. Shortage of water, destruction of biodiversity, loss on capacity of the soil. All of those elements aggregated are creating not only attention in terms of, okay, we have a growing population that we need to feed, but also when it comes to smallholder farmers, when it comes to the most vulnerable, that is creating an extra problem while some people are getting forced to migrate. So let me integrate some of these aspects, right? Let's imagine a shortage of water, a destruction of a soil, a change on the climate patterns that generates the need of a small family of farmers in some part of the world to question what do they do. Well, in some places, this directly will affect more women and girls, right? In some places of the world, that will mean that they will sell a girl for a living. In some places, the father of the family will just go away to find opportunities somewhere else, leaving potentially the mother with the kids and the women of the place much more vulnerable to violence and other situations. That person that will migrate probably to a city. In that city, probably that person will settle himself in a very vulnerable situation when it comes to the roof, right? Probably will settle his place in a kind of house that will not be capable of resisting heat waves or floods or storms or any type of situation or fire situations that are really related again to what the climate crisis is, how the climate crisis is hitting us. Then that person might also even migrate to the borders of the country and put a pressure on the border amongst many others, and therefore even tense the demographic situation, sorry, the democratic situation of the country, and give also part of the narrative to those that are polarizing our society when it comes to political position. So all of the elements are totally integrated, and therefore we need to think about them in an integrated way. And nowadays it's more important than ever that we think about climate as a holistic problem. When it comes to food, as I was saying, it's not only that food systems are being impacted by climate. Food system, unfortunately, as a whole, is creating a lot of this problem as well. It says it's been determined that not only that around 800 million people in the world are suffering hunger, and around 3,000 million people are also under food insecurity, but also food system is the generator of approximately 90% of the deforestation, about 60% of the biodiversity loss, and about a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions. So again, the problem is quite holistic and should be understood in an integrated way. All of this general situation of polycrisis means that we would expect solutions to also come really fast. And I would say that on the other side of the equation, yes, there are a lot of solutions that are raising amazingly well. If you see this trajectory and the history of renewable energy, mostly solar and wind around the world, it's a very positive story, where we're seeing how much of this story behaved as the Darnbush law, like it dragged for a while linearly, as it was never going to change or offer possibilities. And for many, many years, people were not putting a penny on it, not betting that that would be the solution. And all of a sudden, in the last, I would say, 5 years approximately, it went from linear to exponential. And nowadays, there's no doubt that our electricity grid, at least, will get decarbonized, is getting decarbonized a lot faster than what we even thought it would have been possible. Still not fast enough globally to attend the commitments and achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, but now we can focus on that and say, okay, what more then can we do to accelerate that transition towards green electricity? That green electricity is also offering other possibilities that are in front of us. Of course, electric vehicles have developed in the same way. For decades, it was impossible for most of the people, or I would say for all the people, and mostly the technical people, to say that will be a real solution. And nowadays, there's no doubt that many fleets will get decarbonized in this decade, and hopefully and potentially in this decade, the electric vehicle will be competitive against the internal combustion engine. So we will be seeing the death of the internal combustion engine. And with that, it means that there will be less demand for oil and gas, and therefore less demand for new extraction. And we can see those patterns interacting themselves. There will be also a possibility of developing green hydrogen. There is already a trajectory that is very optimistic when it comes to batteries and storage, heat pumps. So we can see both sides of the coin. On one side, we know that we have reached a point where we have massively destroyed our unique environment. We have been behaving as a very bad ancestor. And now we have, on one side, the urgency of changing dramatically almost everything that we do in order to understand how much what we do is affecting our unique environment, and how much what we can do can potentially and hopefully be part of the solutions that are needed for every single aspect of this polycrisis that we are confronting. Why do I mention this? Mostly because, as Mateusz mentioned, these negotiations, a COP, an agreement like the Paris Agreement, is set by the UN rules. And when it comes to the UN rules, are the member states, the ones that are called to negotiate and reach an agreement. What does it mean? Of course, that we will recognize mostly as the countries will say, yes, we have a role to play here when it comes to the European Union, whether they do play a role or not. But the point here is that the political leaders of the world decide when, how, and where they will reach an agreement. And this operates like a sort of spaceship, right? Let's imagine the world, and then there's a spaceship up there, somewhere 100,000 feet above. They are like negotiating. Not everyone is invited to be in that room. In most of the topics that are negotiated, you will only see, I would say, public servants negotiating amongst themselves. And at the end, when they reach an agreement, they watch to the world and say, okay, now this needs to be implemented down there in the world. They mention, indeed, the real world as part of the narrative. In some of the topics that are being negotiated in that spaceship, mostly none of the civil society, none of the subnational governments, none of the businesses or NGOs or financial institutions will have a say, and neither a real connection to the topic. Let's imagine migration, or let's imagine certain diseases, or aspects on how the governments interrelate, or nuclear weapons. But when it comes to these topics, climate, water, plastic pollution, food, biodiversity, it comes to a lot of interest from the general society. So let's imagine, for example, that when it comes to the spaceship, again, when it comes to the member states, The Prime Minister of Tuvalu, 11,000 inhabitants, have a say and will sign or will block an agreement if that's potentially the case. The governor of California, the person that rules the fifth biggest economy of the world, has nothing to say in that agreement. So how do you solve that potential tension? Is through an agenda, a mechanism that will then take that agreement and implement it in the world. That, in the terms of the negotiation, is called the action agenda. And an action agenda, hopefully, will be helping the process of the negotiation, right? When it comes to the Paris Agreement, the action agenda indeed was created in COP20, 1 year before. So it was like the Lima Paris Action Agenda in order to bring information, evidence, enthusiasm from non-state actors that helped that agenda to be integrated in the Paris Agreement. And then it came to what Mateusz mentioned about the naming of the high-level champions, the structure of the Marrakesh Partnership, the global campaigns. I had the honor of being named as the 5th high-level champion. There has been 8 so far. And so my first year, I had the privilege of working with Tomasz Khrushchev from Poland. And then my second and third year working with Nigel Topping from the UK, and I keep on supporting the role of the high-level champion, working in some of these agendas and in particular aspects of it, including, as Mateusz was mentioning, the food system transformation. The point here is that, as you can see, when an agreement is reached, then it comes to the implementation, and the implementation happens amongst these non-state actors, happens amongst, as you see, subnational governments, like the governor of California, right? Municipalities or cities like Warsaw or London or Santiago, then financial institutions, NGOs all around the world, academia, and of course, businesses. In all of these topics that I've been mentioning, climate, food, water, plastics, biodiversity, we have reached a moment when governments have already, on one side, validated the scientific evidence that there is a massive problem and that we humans are part of that problem. Said that we have to do something together about it. In some of them, they have already reached the agreement, like the Paris Agreement on climate or the Kunming-Montreal Agreement on biodiversity. In some of them, they are hopefully going to reach the agreement in the next few months. But then it means that this is the moment for implementation. This is the moment for all of the rest not to wait until listening what needs to be done, but simply do the right thing. And then also it comes to the logic of, that I love the farmers of Francesco, like the idea of there are so many things that we know are the right thing to do. We know that we need to care about the others and about the environment. We know that we humans have received a privilege of living in this environment, and then it's not that the environment is serving us. We have to be the ones caring about the environment and caring about the other species. If not, we already know scientifically that we will be reducing all types of possibilities for not only the future future generations, but even for our generation. And let me refer to this concrete COP. Of course, this is a COP that is mandated to take like the inventory of what had happened from the moment we reached the agreement back in 2015 in COP21 until now. That's what is called the global stocktake. And the news are really bad. We are not on track to achieve the Paris Agreement. We're being really slow in terms of doing the work that we need to do. And on the other side, there are some spots of good news that we can use if we really want to develop ourselves toward solving the climate crisis, and with the climate crisis, many others. The good news is that we do have the tools. Now, of course, it's a moment for mobilizing some very concrete and simple, let's say, concepts. Moving away from fossil fuels really rapidly, accelerating the energy transition in a just way to deploy renewable energy everywhere, including in those places where there's lack of electricity. Of course, mobilizing all the trillions of dollars that are required not only to mitigate the climate crisis, but also to adapt in so many places. We have we calculated that it's around 4 billion people around the world, mostly, as I said, women and girls that are directly and strongly affected by the climate crisis. We need to do something with those populations really urgently. And then, of course, there are some other aspects that are arising that I think that are quite positive, because it will help us to develop a different narrative. One of them, as I said, is food. Why is it important to integrate food into climate? Because of the reasons that I mentioned, how much of the food production is affected by climate, but also how much our food system is affecting climate. If 1/3 of the food is being wasted or lost, that means that most of that food is then generating methane emissions, and that is affecting the climate crisis even worse than CO2. So for moral reasons and for environmental reasons, or if you want to consider both as the same, then we need to act to transform our food systems and then develop the new mechanisms that will serve to feed a growing population in the world, but also to contribute to the regeneration of the ecosystems. So having a food and water day and having food integrated into the climate agenda, bringing all of other efforts that have been happening for a while, the UN Food System Summits of the Secretary General, all the work of FAO, the work of the World Health Organization, and many more, that will be fantastic to give an extra strength to that agenda. The other element that I think I'm really hopeful of is that for the first time, this will be a COP that will have a health day. And the connection between health and climate is critical, at least for two reasons. One is showing that people are dying because of climate. It's not only that people are getting ill, or people are getting affected, or people are vulnerable. People are dying because of the climate crisis. We are seeing how much the heat waves are getting growing and growing. It's not only about the hurricanes or the storms or let's say the sea rise. It's now also heat waves affecting many people around the world and potentially making some parts of this planet inhabitable. So that gives a sense of urgency that probably we haven't used until now. So for many, many years, many leaders of the world were rejecting the possibility of talking about emergency or even talking about crisis. They were talking about climate change, right? Very softly. Now we're talking about an emergency. And the other aspect that is important when it comes to health is that it's bringing the topic into our daily lives, as COVID did. So maybe there's something that we will develop while bringing these very concrete daily elements to the topic, meaning food and health. And of course, we all expect that being a, let's say, petro state or a country that is has based their economy on oil and gas, at least in the first period of their history, then that if this goes well, that will send a really important message to other countries around the world. So Mateusz, back to you.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Incredible amount of knowledge delivered in a passionate and accessible way. I think everybody found something for themselves. And thank you also for not being shy, but addressing heads-on some of the real dilemmas, like you just mentioned, the petro state hosting COP. How do you merge that? Well, you can, and we are seeing the leadership from the presidency and those involved in the COP on that front. So it's amazing to see leadership, which is one of the points that we've been sharing with the president of Poland yesterday, across all groups of people, because you have leadership and leaders everywhere. If you don't mind, Gonzalo, and if you don't mind, everyone, I would like to come back to a practice that was the starting point of every single team meeting at High Level Champions team when I've been working on it together with Gonzalo, which is taking some time of silence to digest what Gonzalo said, maybe have this one question emerge in your mind, or this thought that you will share in the chat after some seconds of silence, or you are still processing, so take your time for that. So we'll go for silence for a little bit, and then we will be back speaking and sharing. It wasn't a minute, and I don't have a gong like Francis had, but we hope, let's remember to take time to pause as well, especially for those going to the COP. That's extremely important, and the three of us that you saw on the screen so far experienced that. So moving to the questions and the Q&A, get yourself ready. We have questions already. Keep them coming. Keep sharing your reflections as well. This is your space. If we are not able to address some of the things that will emerge today, this is not over. We have another webinar coming up, and then another one as well. And let's make it a living community. Thank you for being part of it. I will take the liberty of asking Gonzalo first question. Rooted in this silence, like you just mentioned, Gonzalo, that, and we can see that from your remarks, things are crazy. There's a lot going on, the poly crisis, and a lot of responses as well. So there's huge amount happening. But is there something, when you think about the COP28, or maybe climate crisis and climate action more broadly, that you really don't have the time to even share with the world, right? Is there some aspect that like you really would like to share with us present here in this case, that you never really get to, you know, like even think about a little bit more when you think about the COP28 and climate crisis? And if yes, what that is?
Thank you, my friend. Yeah, one of the difficulties of this agenda is to try to keep focus, right? We cannot cover everything. And being really honest, there are certain topics in which I put most of my agenda, and I recognize that there are so many others in which I would love to have more time, but I don't have. I think that most of the time, as you well know, definitely the agenda normally tends to be in balance between mitigation and adaptation and resilience. So it's a very unjust agenda where we tend to focus a lot on how we will work with those big leaders of the big powerful nations or powerful organizations of the world, because we recognize that they have the power to accelerate the transition. And that means that we will attend many events talking about finance. We will talk about how to transition from oil and gas to renewable energy, how to deploy more electric vehicles. That means that we're not talking enough to those countries that have less power, those communities that do not have energy at all, those that we need them to leapfrog from potentially coal to renewable energy, but there's not even finance for doing that. We will not cover probably people that have no possibility to transport themselves, that do not think about an electric vehicle. When it comes to those populations, yes, I try all the time, and I tell my team to balance that as much as possible. But for example, that one of the aspects that has been remaining for a while on my agenda that I haven't been able to cover, and it's funny that I mentioned Tuvalu, is because of the Pacific Islands. That's a region that I cover very normally. Also, when it comes to the world, let's say I try to cover all the Americas, part of Europe and part of Africa. I hardly go to Asia. Of course, I do almost every. I almost don't go to the Polynesia and the Pacific Islands. So that's in terms of not only geographically, but also the reality that they confront. Those are, and I have been covering Caribbean islands, so I know the reality that they're confronting. But when it comes to those islands, that's one of the hardest expression of this crisis, like countries, nations like Tuvalu that are physically disappearing. It's not a theory. It's not something that might happen in the future. It's already happening today. The country disappears. Just imagine, okay, what happens with those people? They will be citizens of what? Who will receive them? What will happen with their families, their culture, their traditions, their history? And when it comes to those people saying, and we're disappearing because of the inaction of many people in the world, and some people in the world got benefit because this was the way we developed, and they didn't consider how much they were affecting us. I mean, if you put in their shoes, it's extremely dramatic. It's so hard. Yeah, so that's one of the topics I'm happy to share with you.
Clear invitations there for us to go this extra mile or across the wall, whatever that wall is. So thank you for that. Robert, you have been very active in the chat and also live with the work that you are doing in Brazil when it comes to transformation of food system. If you have the opportunity, we would like to give you the floor to share your question with Gonzalo live. I don't know whether you can speak, but if you can speak, and now is your opportunity. We cannot hear you yet, but you are with us.
Oh, Robert, tudo bem? Não, você está mutado. Agora sim. Não, agora não.
Muted once again, but okay. You've been...
Okay, are you listening?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was not prepared to talk, and it is a very enthusiastic subject for me. I'm requesting for the government in the last 2 weeks to a kind of label in all animal products in Brazil, milk, meat, eggs, and other products. A label, this product encourage the human extinction. It's a little dramatic, but I think that it's necessary in this moment. It leads to push on the subject in the government. And I did a big networking, and I know that the ministry, Marina Silva, already accessed it, and they already answered me. And she will be in the COP. And also I am asking directly to the government, to Lula, because it should be a president responsibility, right? A constitutional responsibility of the chief of the government. So I want to know what you think about that, about the exchange for plant-based matrix in the community, and how we can advise the consumers how what they should or not choose to consume. I'm sorry. I hope you could understand that, but I put some numbers. Egg farm in Brazil example that I know personally, they produce 3 million eggs per day. To feed 3 million chicken, they have to produce 300 tons of grains per day. And it's a lot of food for egg production. So we could use change this system for directly vegetable proteins like soy proteins or tofu, and feed better the humans and don't use the animals for that. So it is the idea to to encourage the market to change and to do better choice using this kind of labels. Okay, thank you. If you
over to you, Gonzalo.
Thank you, Robert. Yes, I do agree first on the absurd inefficiency of many of our food systems, even when it comes to, I mean, you chose one species being chicken that is not as inefficient as some others, right? And therefore it can even get worse when it comes to grain or fish meal being used for some beef production or milk production in some countries of the world. And I do agree on what we have as a challenge in general. We are working with several aspects of that agenda. The change in diets is one of the subcategories that we are incorporating as part of the work for the food system transformation, as it is regenerative agriculture, as of course stop deforestation or food banks and even urban farming, of course, sustainable aquaculture. There are several topics, the methane agenda, that we are developing when it comes to this agenda. Labeling is a challenge. One of the reasons why it's challenging, because you have to have common metrics and metrics that are valid for everyone. In some regions and for some legislations, the pushback from legislator is always very hard. We're seeing that as an example with the story of tobacco and the story of sugar. So it's not hard to understand what will be the difficulties being confronted when it comes to try to label aspects of CO2 emissions, or as you said, like even threat to humanity. Doesn't mean that there are like several initiatives going around, and I do expect that very soon there will be some common metrics to validate that one product has a certain percentage of CO2 emissions, whereas some other might have more or less. Therefore, you as a consumer would be capable of choosing, and potentially, as you propose, that might lead into, okay, this means that there is a product A that is killing the environment, whereas the product B is much better for the environment and not killing people, right? Like that would be like a second derivative of the proposal. First, we have to reach the point where we have common metrics and define how to establish. Nowadays, we know quite well when it comes to emissions, it's not as easy to determine, for example, how much sequestration you might have from another aspect, and you have to consider the whole value chain. So all of that is getting evolved and developed as we speak.
Gonzalo, is that okay if we go above the time for a few minutes for you, or you have
No, I have a hard stop in 5 minutes.
Okay, so then you will just miss the announcements on the next steps, but we have two other remarks we would like to have. The first one is from your former colleague, and I hope dear friend, Tomasz Hruszczov. And
no way, my dear friend, so good to see you. This is a beautiful surprise.
And we also have Jay Pocklington from YSI, who is enabling this meeting to take place. So I give them a floor together, Tomasz first, and then Jay. I know Jay has a question as well. So over to both of you. Tomasz, you go first.
How are you doing,
okay,
my friend?
Thank you very much. It's great to see you, Gonzalo, and that's, you know, we all have to thank Mateusz for his magic of how to bring people together and make them talk to each other, and that's really something amazing. And thank you, Mateusz, for doing that, and please keep continuing. Well, what I wanted to add to this discussion is maybe another dimension of this global perspective that we have to deal with, that is sometimes pressing or even oppressing us. And well, let me start from stating, well, the obvious, in my opinion, that unless we properly address and start solving the issue of poverty in the world, we won't be able to tackle climate problem, crisis, whatever you want to call it, because it's very simple. It's very simple factor. If people are poor, they want to live better. If they are hungry, they think of where to get food, how to feed their children, how to feed themselves. They won't be thinking about carbon emissions. They won't be thinking about energy, etc., etc. So these two, poverty and malnutrition or even hunger, are the factors that are jeopardizing any efforts to tackle climate unless these two are not taken properly into account as the priorities. By the way, this is what the Climate Change Convention, the Convention on Biological Diversity, Paris Agreement, etc., they are all stating that poverty eradication, combating hunger are the overriding priorities of all actions, including climate actions. So that's number one. Second issue is that, well, it's of course good to see the technologies that are available. They are unfortunately not available for all. Well, some of these technologies are extremely expensive, and we need to be mindful of what was happening before that rich part of the world, let's say rich north, was adopting certain solutions, certain technologies aimed at reducing and abating emissions, etc., while this poorer part of the world was left with what was not needed anymore in the north. And well, that was some kind of progress for them comparing to what they had before, being handed over with some remainders. Well, this is not the strategy that could be continued any longer. So we need to see the world as a whole as Paris Agreement sees the world. Because Paris Agreement is not saying that every single country has to become carbon or rather climate neutral. Paris Agreement says that the whole world needs to work together to achieve balance between anthropogenic emissions and the sinks. That's the key vision of Paris Agreement that we need to keep in mind and never forget about. Everybody is now concentrating on reducing emissions, but only 20%, I think this is the data from the World Bank that I saw a couple of days ago. 20% of all the expenditures go on adaptation.
Gonzalo needs to leave.
Okay.
I give you the floor in 20 seconds. Gonzalo, 20 last
Very
seconds.
well.
If you have
thanks so much, and thank you for the surprise of allowing me to see my dear friend Tomasz again. It's fantastic. So I'm super grateful of this surprise and the opportunity of addressing these topics. And sorry that I have to leave now, but
we are
thankful, and let's keep the hard work. Hope to see you soon.
I hope so. Well, with Mateusz, everything is possible.
Exactly. Bye, my friend.
Bye.
Thank you. So then let me run it like that. We will go 10 minutes over, everyone. If you need to leave, we of course understand that. We are sorry for going longer, but the topic is very broad. Jay, I will turn over to you because I know you have some thoughts on this topic that are building on what Tomasz was saying and then what Gonzalo was also sharing. So we'll go to you for 1 minute. And then Tomasz, you will have the last expert word, let's say, and then I will sum up literally in 30 seconds, and we'll move to Maria Virginia for closing remarks. So Jay, over to you for a minute.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and great discussion. It sparks so many thoughts. I'm also saying hi from Brazil. Here in Belo Horizonte, heat waves has just hit us, and it's been, very real what climate change actually means here while I've been sitting here listening to you. So my thoughts are, of course, the topic is very, very broad, but the very first thought is climate agreement. Is just trying to adhere to it now even enough? So I think it's pretty clear that we are not meeting the climate agreement. So a more radical shift, to Tomasz's point. Most of the new emissions are going to come from developing countries. So that's growth is addressing the poverty issue. But so there will be growth of CO2 emissions. So there's a big contradiction a little bit here. My big question is how to bring redistributional questions into the technocratic sort of green growth solutions that are being proposed, because we're betting on green growth, and it's more and more unlikely that this, without any redistribution of many things, wealth, power, and other things, cannot happen. So the redistribution issue, how much is that actually present in the reality of the COP or not? And I suspect it's not. And then my final sort of thought and question, provocation is, given that we are very likely, the more likely scenario is that we will not meet the Paris agreements, how are we preparing for any fallout and aftermath of the scenarios following this? There's many bad scenarios we can imagine. How much is that present in the discussions, and how are preparations maybe preparing for these outcomes? I hope, Mateusz, that was under 1 minute, but back to you.
Thank you, Jay. Very rich. Like, we could run 5 webinars out of the questions that you posed and only scratch the surface. I will hold my comments for now, hand over to Tomasz for literally 1 minute of either sharing his one final thought with us or answering your question, Jay, which is, hey, what about the technocratic paradigm and how to tackle that? And also, what is the future if we don't reach Paris Agreement targets? What happens then? Or what is the scenario B, if you will? So Tomasz, over to you.
Just two quick responses. The first, I am optimist. So I think that we are still able to achieve what Paris Agreement has in it in Article 4.1, which means that we will achieve this neutrality by the end of the century. That's what Paris Agreement wants from us. And we won't allow the temperature to go above 2 degrees. How close we will stay to 1.5, that's a different story. We'll see. It depends on too many elements to even to list them, not to discuss them right now. But there is a very important question that of redistribution, and very important question how to start incorporating the thinking about environment, about social impacts in business operation. And there is some kind of good news, at least in some jurisdictions, which is called environmental social governance, which is the set of standards that are now being adopted, and more and more companies have to comply with the laws that brought this kind of thinking, this kind of addressing of various risks in their management practices. Hopefully, these practices will develop and become a realistic guideline for all people that manage anything. Doesn't matter whether it is a company or the program. Doesn't matter whether it is the city or the state in the United States of America. Well, this is the way of thinking that brings together environment, social aspects, and economy. And this is what we need to do, not to lose the goal and not lose Paris Agreement at the same time. That would be my quick response. But we'll see what the negotiators will eventually conclude in Dubai.
Thank you, Tomasz. If you have the phone number of negotiators, I'm saying that to both those who you can see on the screen, but also all of the others listening now or later to the recording, call them up and share your sentiments, your hopes, your expectations, your wishes, your requests, or even demands, if this is what you have. Because this connection, COP is really ultimately about negotiations, and let's not forget that as we are talking about this topic, at least from our experience, which is what we are sharing in this call, in this webinar. Gonzalo is out, but very big thank you to him and thank you to his work. Thank you for being able to build on your work, Tomasz, and then your predecessors, and then all the best to current high-level champions and the future high-level champions. We will be moving to Maria Virginia for closing remarks. Before that, I have two very quick points to make. Very warm words were said about my work, for which I am really grateful. None of that would be possible if not a lot of people around me, including Jay, including Tomasz, including Maria Virginia. So all the people who you see on the screen and many, many more, including Gonzalo, who was with us today. So I kind of received those thank you with big gratefulness, and I share that and include all of those who make it possible with you all. Robert, to your points and questions and the work that you are doing, I just shared with you twice recently the same link that I've shared earlier in this webinar. High-level champions for climate action are having a call to action for food systems transformation that also includes, once you support it, you can submit 200-word statement of action through a dedicated platform. So the point is, make yourself known to that process. You are doing great work in Brazil. A lot of us are doing amazing work all around the world. Communicate that, let that know to the public opinion, but also to the formal processes. And high-level champions is a formal process for getting all of the non-state actors to be known to the negotiators. So if there is one thing you prioritize engagement with high-level champions, because this is your pathway to the negotiators, to the parties. With that said, over to Maria Virginia for final remarks.
Thank you, Mateusz, Jay, Tomasz, and all of you. I just pasted in the chat because hearing all of you and in this conversation and the topic of COP and COP28, Pope Francis wrote recently an encyclica that is called Laudato Deum, where he really expressed his expectations about COP28. And I was rereading it recently, and in one of his points, he's saying that in the past, especially in this crisis, like polycrisis was Gonzalo calling, Pope Francis says that when there was a will, very significant results were obtained. And he shares in the encyclica very some examples of that. But I am grateful to see all of you here, because for sure, if there is an interest, there is a will, and I'm sure a lot of things can be done. Mateusz was doing this exercise and inviting us to do 30 seconds of silence. And we wanted to invite you to very quickly this short invitation of going to the MNT. There is the QR code in the screen right now, and share after all this presentation, all these questions, everything what you heard in the silence, what is one word or a couple of words that stayed in your mind after this meeting that we had today? we will also be sharing this after the meeting, but as we are running over the time, but if you can share with us, so we can share with the others as well. We were saying this meeting is part of 3 meetings that we are doing, and with the intention of creating this community, creating more awareness, and really do something in this time of crisis, this daily crisis Gonzalo was saying, and I wrote this down because it's really that. It's not something that we do one day yes and one day no, but it's something that is daily. So because of that, lastly, and not to steal more of your time, we want to remind when is the next meeting, when is the next time that we are seeing each other. That is going to happen on December 9 at 1 p.m. set. It will be online webinar as this one, but those that will be speaking will be Mateusz and I from the experiences of the ground of the COP, but also other YSI members that are joining and other people that we will meet on the ground and we will invite to share with all of you, and so you have also the space to ask questions to those that are on the grounds of COP. If you are planning to attend COP physically and go to Dubai, please let us know so we can see each other, and probably you can be also one of these sharing your experience with us. And then our 3rd webinar will be on December 20 at 5 p.m. set, and that will be the after COP. So once again, I will stop sharing the screen to be able to see some of you here. And if you are there, Flor is the one that has been working with all the technical part on the background. If you want to come in the screen, you are welcome, and we would love to see you. But we want to say thank you to all of you for joining, for really saying yes to this invitation of talking more about the topic of COP, of starting getting together, starting doing something. And we hope that this path is one of many of the time that we will share together, as Thomas was saying a lot. And we had the pleasure of seeing each other many times, Thomas. So I hope to keep seeing you and keep seeing more. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We are here for you at the COP, so let's make it a live. YSI platform is the way, and see you from the COP on December the 9th at 5 p.m. 5 p.m.
1 p.m.
1 p.m. Sorry.
1
I
p.m.
know I made a mistake. It couldn't be perfect, and now it's not perfect, so we can finish. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Flor.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you.